He said I'd only get to the dolls, but I walked out owning the company. Sebastian leaned back in the leather chair, like he was already king. His voice carried across the lawyer's office, smug enough to stain the oak-paneled walls. I'm getting the house and the business, he announced, lips curling into a smirk. She just gets the dolls. The laugh that followed wasn't his alone. My aunt snickered behind a tissue she didn't need. Cousins exchanged smirks, and even Diane, my stepmother, nodded, as though this cruel performance was expected. I sat still in my simple black dress, palms pressed flat against my knees. I've learned silence in this family buys me something control. They expect me to rise to sputter to beg. I refuse. Anna always was Daddy's little princess with her dollhouse collection, Aunt Patricia cooed. At least Sebastian understands business. Understand business? I bit my tongue so hard, I tasted metal. This was the same man who once asked me if a 2x4 was literally 2 inches by 4 inches. The same man who thought profit margins were doodles in the corner of a page. He couldn't balance a checkbook, but here he was, crowned heir apparent to everything I'd built with my hands and sweat. They laughed at me like I was a child still playing with toys, while my brother, who hadn't set foot on a construction site more than twice in his life, leaned into the role of chosen one. Well, Sebastian added, adjusting his tie with exaggerated care, I suppose Anna can keep playing with her toys while I handle the real responsibilities. Father always said the business needed strong leadership. The lawyer, Mr. Harrison, cleared his throat. The sound was sharp, like chalk dragged across a blackboard, and it silenced the room. He was elderly, with kind eyes that had watched our family for decades. His hands trembled slightly as he shuffled through his papers, but his voice, steady, deliberate, cut through the smug air like a blade. Actually, he said, the company was never in his name. The air conditioning hummed overhead, but everything else froze. Sebastian blinked, his grin slipping. Excuse me. My heart punched my ribs, though my face remained calm. Something inside me stirred warm, dangerous, hopeful. Mr. Harrison repeated slower this time. The company was never in his name. The laughter evaporated. Cousins shifted in their seats. Diane's eyes darted to Sebastian, searching for reassurance. None came. I let the silence sit, because for the first time in years, I wasn't the punchline. In that moment, I remembered my father's last days. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and regret. He had clutched my hand, his once iron grip weak, and whispered about the dolls. Not just about sentiment, he said. I hadn't understood then, but as Mr. Harrison's words hung in the room like thunder waiting to break. I thought maybe, just maybe, I finally did. Sebastian's voice cracked. What do you mean? The old lawyer adjusted his glasses, gaze steady. He hadn't dropped a bomb like this by mistake. He knew exactly what he was doing. And judging by the flicker of something like mischief in his eyes, he'd been waiting for this moment as long as I had. Ask yourself, what would you do if your whole family dismissed you for a decade only to find out the game had been rigged in your favor all along? For me, the answer was simple. Sit very still and wait for them to choke on their certainty. Growing up in the Wells family meant I lived in my brother's shadow, whether I wanted to or not. Sebastian, 5 years older, was the golden boy. Quarterback in high school, dated the homecoming queen, sailed through college with grades everyone pretended were brilliant. At family dinners, my father would beam and raise his glass. Sebastian's destined for greatness, and me, I was the afterthought, the one who kept herself busy. The truth. While Sebastian was off partying, traveling, or networking, I was knee-deep in the very business he bragged about inheriting. I was the one on construction sites at 6 a.m., hard hat on boots, caked in mud, making sure subcontractors didn't cut corners. I was the one double-checking safety harnesses because my father's workers trusted me more than his managers. Anna's good with numbers, my dad would say. At barbecues, dismissing years of sweat and strategy, as though math was some parlor trick. But I kept at it. I read every blueprint, memorized zoning laws, built relationships with unions. When our biggest client nearly walked away from a $1 million contract, it was me, not Sebastian, who salvaged it. Meanwhile, Sebastian was posting photos from Thailand, finding himself. Do you know what it's like to bleed for something, while your family insists you're just playing house, is to watch the person who contributes nothing get crowned heir because he knows how to smile and shake hands? I learned to stay quiet, to let them underestimate me. My father used to say, never show your whole hand until it matters. I didn't realize until years later that he'd meant more than poker. 3 months before this will reading, I sat in that sterile hospital room with my father as machines beeped faintly in the background. He was fading, his once booming voice reduced to whispers. You've been my right hand all these years, he murmured. You understand this business better than anyone. I squeezed his hand, told him not to worry, but his eyes flicked to that leather briefcase he never let out of sight. He wanted to say more, I could see it. His lips trembled with unsaid words. Anna, he rasped the dolls, not just sentiment. I thought he was delirious, clinging to childhood memories. But sitting here now, with Mr. Harrison's words dropping like lead weights in the silence, I wondered if my father had been trying to prepare me for this exact moment. Sebastian shifted uncomfortably beside me, his bravado leaking out in sweat. This is ridiculous, he snapped. I'm his son. Everyone knows I'm supposed to inherit the business. I almost laughed. Supposed to? That was Sebastian in a nutshell, believing entitlement was the same thing as effort. The lawyer's eyes met mine for the briefest moment, and I swear there was a spark of recognition there. He knew. He knew what I had carried all these years, what my father had trusted me with. And as Sebastian's face shifted from disbelief to something dangerously close to panic, I felt it, the balance finally tipping. All the years of invisibility of swallowing my pride of working in silence. They were about to pay off. The room was suffocating in its silence, like the air itself knew a battle was about to unfold. Sebastian's jaw tightened, his fingers drumming against the polished oak table. He looked like a man trying to summon authority he didn't actually have. "This is some kind of mistake," he said, finally, his voice sharp, almost desperate. "Anna doesn't know anything about running a company." She's just his eyes flicked toward me, narrowing the bookkeeper. The word stung, even though I'd heard it 1,000 times before. Bookkeeper. As though my decade of 12-hour days crisis management and million-dollar negotiations boiled down to balancing spreadsheets. I swallowed the anger. Instead of arguing, I let Mr. Harrison handle it. "There's no mistake," the lawyer said calmly, sliding a thick folder across the table. "Your father transferred ownership of Timbermir Brewing to Anna 5 years ago. She has been the legal owner since 2019, 5 years." I felt the words land like a blow in the pit of my stomach, even though I already knew the truth deep down. 5 years ago, that was when Sebastian had been finding himself on the beaches of Thailand, while I was knee-deep in city permits and union negotiations, saving our largest development project from collapse. "I don't believe this," Sebastian muttered, flipping through the pages as if denial could rewrite ink. His hands trembled slightly, betraying the panic he was trying so hard to conceal. "Believe it or don't," Mr. Harrison said, adjusting his glasses. "It doesn't change the fact that Anna has signed every contract, managed every debt, and shouldered every liability. The records are clear. The company's growth, 40% over the last 5 years, is a direct reflection of her leadership. 40%. My pulse quickened. Hearing it spoken aloud in front of family, who had never even acknowledged my existence, felt surreal. Aunt Patricia's lips parted, but no words came. My stepmother Diane shifted in her seat, her eyes darting between Sebastian and me, like she'd suddenly realized she'd bet on the wrong horse. Sebastian, however, doubled down. He always did. "But I have an MBA," he blurted, as though a degree earned with a 2.8 GPA and 5 extensions could erase years of neglect. The words slipped out of me before I could stop them. "An MBA you took 5 years to finish because you kept dropping out to find yourself." Meanwhile, I was finding solutions to keep our workers paid. The room froze. My voice, steady, sharp, undeniable, echoed in the silence. For once, I hadn't swallowed it. Sebastian's face flushed crimson, but he couldn't meet my eyes. He looked to our relatives for backup, but all he found were uncomfortable stares and whispered disbelief. Perhaps Mr. Harrison interjected, his tone diplomatic but firm. "We should move on to the rest of the estate distribution." And just like that, the balance of power shifted. For the first time in my life, Sebastian wasn't the golden boy. He was the man with nothing but a crumbling facade. And I was the woman my father had trusted all along. But I had no idea the next revelation would make this battle look like a warm-up. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat, shuffling through the next set of documents. The tension in the room was so thick, it felt like even the mahogany walls were leaning in to hear what came next. As for personal estate distribution, he began. "Sebastian will inherit the Wells family home, along with your father's personal investment accounts." Sebastian straightened to relief, flashing across his face. It lasted all of 3 seconds. "There is, however, a $300,000 mortgage balance on the house." Mr. Harrison added, his tone deliberately neutral. "And the investments have been significantly drawn down in recent years." The words landed with a dull thud. I watched as Sebastian's relief curdled into something close to nausea. He was calculating house repairs, mortgage payments, dwindling assets, all while trying to keep his poker face intact. And finally, Mr. Harrison said, turning toward me, "The antique doll collection, with all accompanying documentation and appraisals, goes to Anna." The room erupted in nervous laughter. Aunt Patricia fanned herself dramatically. Diane forced a smile. Even Sebastian barked out a bitter chuckle. "She gets the dolls," he sneered. "Perfect. At least I got the house. She can keep playing with toys." The words might have stung once, not anymore. I leaned back in my chair, forcing myself to appear calm, though my heart was pounding. My father's last cryptic words echoed in my mind. "The dolls aren't just about sentiment, Mr. Harrison," I said, carefully. "Could you elaborate on the appraisals?" The lawyer adjusted his glasses, and for the first time all morning, I saw a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. "Certainly. The collection consists of 47 pieces, including rare Jumeau dolls from the 1870s and a complete set of early Madame Alexander collectibles. The most recent appraisal conducted last year valued the collection at approximately $512,000. The silence that followed was electric. $500,000. Aunt Patricia gasped. Diane's hand froze halfway to her mouth. Sebastian's face drained of color, his triumphant smirk collapsing into disbelief. "You're joking," he said hoarsely. $500,000 for dolls?" "Antique collectibles," Mr. Harrison corrected smoothly. "They are highly sought after in European and American markets. Your father was very clear about their historical and financial value." I almost smiled. I remembered the afternoons spent with Grandma cataloging each piece, polishing glass cases, listening to stories about craftsmanship and history while Sebastian rolled his eyes. They had laughed then, too. And now, that laughter was choking them. "So let me understand this," Sebastian said, his voice cracking. "Anna gets a multi-million-dollar company and $500,000 in antiques, and I get, what, a debt-ridden house and a used pickup truck." "That appears correct," Mr. Harrison said simply. For once, nobody rushed to reassure him. Nobody rushed to minimize me. They were too busy recalculating the hierarchy they'd lived by for decades. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the invisible sister. I was the storm they never saw coming. Sebastian's jaw clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might crack. He kept shaking his head like if he denied reality hard enough, the words would change. "This is insane," he snapped. "There has to be a mistake. Anna's just the bookkeeper. She doesn't know how to run a company." The word bookkeeper landed like a slap. For years, that was the box they shoved me into: an assistant, a helper, the one who did the boring paperwork while Sebastian wore the crown. But now I let that insult roll over me, cold steel settling in my chest. "Say that again," I whispered, leaning forward, "and I'll show you exactly what this bookkeeper has been doing for the past 5 years. The family shifted uncomfortably, glancing between us. Aunt Patricia cleared her throat as if to diffuse the tension, but her usual theatrics fell flat in the thick silence. Sebastian barked a humorless laugh. "You're telling me Dad just handed her the company? No way. He told me I'd be taking over." "You told him?" I corrected sharply. He listened. "There's a difference." Mr. Harrison slid a stack of folders across the polished table toward me. "Miss Wells anticipated this reaction," he said almost kindly. "She's prepared documentation." I placed the folders in front of me and began opening them one by one. Each was labeled meticulously. Financial growth, 2019 to 2024 employee retention strategies. Major contracts, resolved client testimonials. The sound of papers rustling was the only noise in the room as I laid them out like cards in a game Sebastian never bothered to learn. Revenue growth up 40% in 5 years, I said evenly. Client base expanded by 30%. Employee turnover down to its lowest in company history. Safety violations reduced by half. Every decision, every crisis, every late night call, you think Dad trusted you with those. While you were in Thailand finding yourself, I was finding ways to keep this company alive. Sebastian's face flushed red. "That doesn't mean you're qualified? I cut in my voice, rising for the first time. I've read blueprints, negotiated with unions, saved million-dollar contracts, and kept hundreds of workers employed. Meanwhile, you've spent your life coasting on charm and connections. Qualified isn't the word you should be questioning, Sebastian. It's entitled." The room fell silent again, but this time it was different. This wasn't the shocked quiet of disbelief. This was the kind of silence that follows when people realize they've been wrong, painfully, embarrassingly wrong. Even Diane, my stepmother, who had always sided with Sebastian, looked away, her lips pressed into a thin line. Mr. Harrison leaned back, folding his hands. Mr. Wells knew what he was doing. He entrusted his legacy to the one child who proved herself through actions, not promises. I looked directly at Sebastian, holding his gaze until he finally dropped his eyes. For the first time in our lives, the golden boy had no comeback. And for the first time in mine, I didn't need anyone else to defend me. Sebastian finally found his voice again, though it trembled. "Fine, maybe Dad gave her the business, but at least I got the house. That's something. And she just gets the dolls." The way he spat that last word, dolls, as if it were poison, almost made me laugh. Almost. Aunt Patricia chuckled, shaking her head. "At least that makes sense. Anna always loved those creepy little things. Daddy's little princess with her dollhouse collection." Her words stung not because they were true, but because they reduced years of dedication into a caricature. I never loved the dolls. I loved the history they carried, the afternoons spent with Grandma cataloging every piece, the lessons in patience and detail that came with handling objects so fragile, yet so valuable. But Sebastian couldn't see that. He saw toys. He saw mockery. He saw something to belittle. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. "Actually, there's more to that collection than sentimentality." He pulled out another folder, heavier this time, bound with a ribbon that had clearly been opened and resealed many times. My pulse quickened. Dad's last words echoed in my memory, the ones he'd whispered when he was too weak to lift his head. "The dolls, Anna. It's not just about sentiment." Mr. Harrison laid the documents out for everyone to see. The collection consists of 47 antique dolls, including several rare French bisque pieces from the 1870s and a complete set of early Madame Alexander originals. The most recent appraisal valued the collection at $5,000 and $12,000. The room erupted. $500,000. 4 dolls? Aunt Patricia gasped, clutching her pearls as if she might faint. "That's ridiculous," Diane snapped, though her voice betrayed the crack of panic. Sebastian stared at me, slack-jawed. His earlier smugness drained from his face as quickly as blood from a wound. That can't be right." "It's more than right," I said, my voice calm, steady, sharpened by years of being dismissed. Grandma's collection was curated across generations. Every piece chosen carefully, maintained meticulously. I helped her catalog them. I know exactly what they're worth. I let the silence hang, let him squirm as the truth settled in. The joke inheritance, the one he had mocked before the words even left Mr. Harrison's lips, was worth more than the house he now clung to, buried under a mortgage he could never sustain. I leaned forward, lowering my voice so the weight of my words struck deeper. "Tell me, Sebastian, still think I just play with toys while you handle the real business?" His hands curled into fists on the table. His face burned red, then pale. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in his eyes. Not of me, but of the consequences he had never once believed he'd face. Inside, I felt a dangerous warmth spread through me. The balance of power had shifted. And this time, there was no going back. Sebastian's voice cracked as he tried to recover. This has to be some kind of mistake. Dad always said the company was mine. He told everyone at Thanksgiving I tilted my head studying him the way I used to study blueprints. Every flaw stood out when you knew what to look for. He said it, Sebastian, because he knew you liked hearing it. But Dad was a builder, not a fool. He put the company in the hands of the person who actually built it. Mr. Harrison didn't flinch as he shuffled the thick stack of documents. Mr. Wells legally transferred ownership to Anna 5 years ago. She's been sole proprietor since September of 2019. This transfer was designed to protect the company from potential lawsuits and to ensure continuity under the most capable leadership. Capable Sebastian barked out a laugh, desperate and brittle. She was just the bookkeeper. She filed invoices. That's it. I felt my jaw tighten. For years that word just had been their weapon. Just the helper. Just the organizer. Just the girl with her dolls. Funny thing, I said evenly, bookkeepers don't usually negotiate million-dollar contracts. They don't restructure union agreements. They don't salvage relationships with clients you almost lost by forgetting meetings. But I did. Every single time you dropped the ball. The color drained from his face. Around the table, eyes darted between us. Some faces betrayed dawning realization. Others clung to denial. Aunt Patricia dabbed at her dry eyes, muttering something about family tradition. But I wasn't finished. You see, Sebastian Dad didn't leave Timbermir Brewing to me out of pity. He left it because he knew I was the one holding it together while you were backpacking through Thailand trying to find yourself. He saw who actually carried the company on their back. And for once, he made a decision without asking anyone's permission. The lawyer cleared his throat again, his voice steady but firm. And for clarity, Timbermir Brewing was appraised last month at $2.3 million. Under Miss Wells' leadership, its value has grown by nearly 40% since the transfer. The silence that followed was sharp, almost metallic. Sebastian's lips moved, but no sound came out at first, then barely above a whisper. So what do I get? Mr. Harrison flipped to the final page. The family house, minus its current mortgage balance. Your father's personal investments, though many were liquidated in recent years. And his truck. A strangled laugh escaped my brother's throat, though there was no humor in it. A house I can't afford and a truck that barely runs, while she gets everything else. I leaned back, finally allowing myself a small, satisfied smile. Not everything, Sebastian. Just what I earned. For the first time in my life, the golden boy looked small. And for the first time in my life, I felt like the real heir. Sebastian's jaw worked furiously, like he was chewing on a lie he couldn't quite spit out. His eyes darted from me to the lawyer, to Aunt Patricia, to anyone who might rescue him. No one moved. This isn't fair, he finally blurted. Dad would never, he wouldn't give away the company without telling me. I kept my voice calm, almost too calm. He didn't give it away. He handed it to the person who was already running it. Mr. Harrison slid another folder across the polished wood. In addition to the transfer, your father included a letter of intent, written in his own hand, notarized. He paused, letting the weight of that detail sink in. In it, he stated clearly that Miss Wells had proven her capability and that entrusting her was the only logical choice. Sebastian snatched the folder, flipping pages with frantic hands. His eyes skimmed, then froze. Whatever Dad had written, it cut through him like a blade. Meanwhile, I reached into my own bag and placed a binder on the table, thick, heavy, worn at the edges. I had debated for weeks whether I'd ever need it. Turns out, today was the day. This, I said, my voice sharp, is 5 years' worth of records. Contracts I secured. Projects I managed. Testimonials from clients and suppliers. Even pay stubs showing workers kept their jobs through downturns. Every crisis you ignored, every fire I put out. It's all here. I tapped the binder. So when you call me just the bookkeeper again, remember that this bookkeeper is the reason you still had a family business to come home to. The room shifted. Aunt Patricia's face pinched as though she'd swallowed something sour. My stepmother Diane pressed her lips together, unable to defend him this time. Sebastian shoved the folder back toward the lawyer. His voice broke. She manipulated him. She tricked him somehow. No, I said softly, leaning forward so only he could hear. He finally saw me. For a heartbeat, he looked like a little boy again, confused, lost-cornered. But then, pride flared, and his voice rose. This isn't over. I'll challenge it. I'll drag this through the courts if I have to. I leaned back in my chair, letting a faint smile tug at my lips. Do what you need to do, Sebastian. But when the dust settles, the truth will still be sitting in my chair. The sound of the clock ticking on the wall filled the silence. Tick, tock, tick, tock. And in that moment, everyone in the room finally understood the fight he thought he was starting had already been won. Sebastian slumped in his chair, beaten but unwilling to admit it. Mr. Harrison shuffled the last papers, clearing his throat. Now regarding the personal estate, he said, the house vehicles and personal investments go to Sebastian. As for the antique doll collection, that passes to Anna, along with all associated appraisals. A ripple of laughter broke across the room, Sebastian's laughter bitter and desperate. See, she gets the dolls. Figures. I didn't move, didn't blink. My father's voice echoed in my mind from those quiet nights in the hospital. The dolls, Anna, they're not just about sentiment. Mr. Harrison, I said carefully, could you elaborate on those appraisals? The lawyer smiled faintly, almost conspiratorial. Certainly. The collection consists of 47 pieces. Several are rare jumeau dolls from the 1870s. There's also a complete set of early Madame Alexanders. Last year's appraisal valued the collection at $512,000. The heir left the room all at once. $500,000? And Patricia's hand flew to her mouth. Diane's wine glass trembled against the table. Sebastian's laugh cracked into silence, his face draining of color. For dolls, he croaked. Antiques, Mr. Harrison corrected. Meticulously preserved, historically significant, and highly sought after in private markets. I remembered polishing those dolls with my grandmother, listening to her stories about where each one had come from: Paris, London, Berlin. I had been the only child patient enough to care. Everyone else rolled their eyes. Everyone except Dad. Now those toys were worth more than Sebastian's crumbling inheritance combined. Sebastian shot up from his chair. This is absurd. $500,000 for creepy old dolls while I get saddled with a mortgage. Correction, I said evenly. You get the house, the car, and the debts attached to them. I get the business and the dolls. We both got exactly what Dad believed we could handle. The silence was crushing. No one defended him. No one laughed this time. Sebastian's hands clenched into fists, his perfect image crumbling as fast as the delusions he'd lived on his whole life. And in the middle of it, I felt something I hadn't in years: vindication. Sebastian's fist slammed against the table. This can't stand. I'll contest the will. I'll drag this through court if I have to. His voice cracked, trembling with the weight of fear he couldn't hide anymore. Mr. Harrison didn't flinch. You may try, of course, but your father's transfer of the business predates the will by 5 years. Legally, Anna has been the owner all along. And as for the dolls, well, the appraisals speak for themselves. Sebastian turned on me, his face contorted. You knew about this. You've been plotting against me? I leaned forward, meeting his eyes with a calm I hadn't felt until this exact moment. No, Sebastian. I've been working. Something you never bothered to do. The room buzzed with whispers, the family shifting uncomfortably in their seats. For years they had worshipped him, laughed at his jokes, excused his failures. Now they were watching him unravel in real time. You don't understand what you're doing, he spat. You'll sink this company without me. The irony almost made me laugh. The company has already grown 40% under my management, I said. Without you. Sebastian's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, but no sound came. His last defense had been stripped away. For the first time, I realized the golden boy had nothing left but smoke and mirrors. And now even the mirrors were gone. This was the end of his illusion, and the beginning of my story. The meeting ended like a storm that had ripped through the room, leaving silence in its wake. I gathered my folder with steady hands, though inside my chest, my heart was pounding like a drum. Years of being dismissed, ignored and mocked had led to this moment, and now it was mine. As I stood to leave, I felt every pair of eyes follow me. Some looked shocked, others guilty, and a few quietly impressed. Aunt Patricia dabbed her eyes again, but this time there were no fake tears, just shame. Sebastian stormed out first, his footsteps echoing down the polished hallway. I watched through the glass as he shoved the heavy doors open and lit a cigarette with shaking hands, his carefully polished facade now cracked wide open. When I stepped out moments later, the air outside felt different, lighter, cleaner. As though I had walked out of a cage I hadn't even realized I was trapped in. Sebastian turned to me, his voice stripped of its arrogance. You think you've won, Anna? But you don't know this family like I do. They'll never see you as more than the bookkeeper. I studied him carefully. His tie was crooked, his face pale. For the first time, he looked small to me. Not the golden boy who always won by default, but just a man whose lies had finally caught up with him. I don't need their approval anymore, I replied softly. The company's mine, and so is my future. He flinched like the words themselves had struck him. For once, there was no smug retort, no laugh to cover his insecurity, just silence. The sun was setting behind the courthouse, casting long shadows across the pavement. I walked past him without another glance, my heels clicking against the stone steps like punctuation marks to a sentence long overdue. Behind me, I heard him mutter something under his breath, half curse, half plea, but I didn't turn back. Because for the first time in my life, the path ahead belonged to me alone. Thank you so much for watching and supporting these stories. Every like, comment, and subscription helps us bring more full story dramas to life.